I have been looking forward to this day for a while now because today is the day I get to tell you all about one of my favorite bikes, the Polygon Trid ZZ. Now, if you know me, you know I love taking my dirt jumper, the Trid, to my local jumps, but I also love riding there with my Siskiyou T9. Both bikes have their own strengths that make them each fun in their own way. But that point leads me to the Trid ZZ, which is a slopestyle bike that combines both the playful agility of a dirt jumper with the forgiveness of a trail bike, making it an absolute weapon on big old jumps, dual slalom courses, and more. But it's not completely without compromises, and some folks might be better off with the traditional hardtail dirt jumper. In fact, before we dive too far into the Trid ZZ, I want to talk a little bit about what the differences are between a dirt jumper and a slopestyle bike. As you may have already noticed by just checking out these two bikes, the biggest difference between the Trid and the Trid ZZ is the suspension. The added 100 millimeters of rear suspension on the Trid ZZ does a few things. First, it adds more support for big features, and that's why almost all top-level slopestyle athletes use full suspension bikes like this one. Now, even if you're not boosting 50-foot doubles, you can still take advantage of the more forgiving rear end, regardless of how big your local jumps are. The second main benefit of the rear suspension is added grip. Just like on a trail bike, suspension works not only to dampen impacts, but also to keep your wheel in contact with the ground. This is why slopestyle bikes are often the bike of choice for dual slalom racing, an event that combines the high speed of downhill mountain biking with the features of a BMX track. But like I mentioned earlier, there's still some compromises you have to make by choosing the slopestyle bike, one of the biggest being the weight that's added from the rear shock. The Trid ZZ comes in 5 pounds or 2.3 kilograms heavier than the Trid. This probably won't be noticed by most riders, but it could come as a slight detriment if you're doing rotational tricks like 360s or racing at a BMX track. Speaking of BMX racing and pump tracks, that's the second area where a traditional dirt jumper has an edge over a slope bike. Not only will it be lighter, but the rigid rear end also allows for more direct power delivery when pumping and pedaling, leading to higher speeds and more precise handling. You can get around this a bit by using the lockout lever on the Trid ZZ shock, but if you primarily plan to ride pump tracks, you'd probably be better off with the standard Trid. But we're not talking about the pump track today, we're talking about jumps. Big jumps. And like I said earlier, this is where the unique full suspension design of the Trid ZZ is paramount. The bike uses a single pivot design, delivering a balanced 100 millimeters of travel front and rear. The beefy reinforced rear triangle combined with the ovalized aluminum tubing at the front of the bike keep it stiff during high compression G-outs and landings. It also features internal cable routing for the rear derailleur, but keeps the brake hose external for easy maintenance. In terms of geometry, the Trid ZZ gets a 69-degree head tube angle and 425mm reach, slightly longer and slacker than its hardtail counterpart. This helps keep the bike stable at higher speeds, but of course still prioritize flickability and playfulness. At the back of the bike are some stubby 400mm chainstays, giving the bike a wheelbase of 1080mm, perfect for flips, spins, and of course straight airs. It's worth noting that unlike the rest of Polygon's range, the Trid and Trid ZZ are only available in one size, which is not uncommon for these type of bikes. I'm 5'5" and felt like the bike fit perfectly. My husband, on the other hand, who's 6'1", was also comfortable on the bike, though he said he'd likely opt for a higher rise handlebar, so if you're on the taller side of the spectrum, keep that in mind. Now let's talk components. I've already mentioned the 100 millimeters of travel front and back, and all of that is provided by RockShox, starting with the RockShox Pike DJ up front and Deluxe Select in the rear. Unsurprisingly, these were both easy to set up and were more than capable of handling whatever I threw at them. Polygon has gone ahead and spec'd this bike with a 7-speed SRAM downhill drivetrain. This provides a few benefits. If you're planning on racing the bike, it may be helpful to have a few gears to choose from, and finding the right gear or even changing gears mid-race is as easy as it is on a trail bike. Speaking of trail bikes, another big benefit is that if you have to pedal into your local jump spot or even just pedal back up to the start of the line, you're not stuck walking or straining yourself like you would be on a single-speed bike. Obviously, if you prefer the simplicity and weight savings of a single speed, that's a relatively simple aftermarket switch, but personally, I think the 7-speed setup makes the bike a lot more versatile. The Trid ZZ is also equipped with Shimano hydraulic disc brakes. These brakes are powerful, reliable, and give you the control to modulate your speed precisely. Whether you're setting up for a feature or adjusting your speed mid-course, having reliable braking control can make a huge difference when you're riding big features or racing dual slalom. Lastly, the bike is also spec'd with double-walled rims and V-Tire Code XCV tires, which provide excellent grip on everything from dirt to wood ramps to concrete. The tires are also designed to handle the impact of repeated jumps and tricks, offering durability along with traction. So how does the Trid ZZ actually feel when you're riding it? Well, in one word, fun. This bike is incredibly responsive and feels light and easy to throw around in the air, just like a dirt jumper. But with the rear suspension, it also feels surprisingly forgiving on big landings. This combination is a pretty game-changing experience for most riders, and like I alluded to at the beginning of the video, it's really a nice combination between a trail bike and a dirt jumper. For example, I have a steep wood jump in my backyard designed specifically for dirt jumpers and BMX bikes, and the Trid ZZ handled it just fine. I'd honestly say I preferred it to my dirt jumper. On the other hand, I also rode the bike down one of my favorite flowy mountain bike trails, a place where the dirt jumper would have felt harsh and skittish, but the Trid ZZ took it all in stride. Now, I'm not gonna stand here and tell you that I think the Slopestyle bike would be, your one bike quiver type of bike, but maybe. Now, let's wrap things up by telling you who I think the Trid ZZ Slopestyle bike is for. The first and most obvious one is the dedicated dirt jumper looking to take their riding to the next level. The forgiving nature of the full suspension frame combined with high-quality components makes this bike an absolute progression machine. So if you're ready to throw harder tricks over bigger features, the Trid ZZ is for you. The second person I'd recommend the Trid ZZ for is the dedicated mountain biker who is used to a full suspension mountain bike, but wants to get a dedicated dirt jump bike. This type of rider was actually me about a year ago, and I gotta say, there's a pretty big difference in the ride feel and even the technique used to jump them, but the Trid ZZ helps bridge that gap without compromising the playful maneuverability we all love about dirt jumpers. One quick caveat I'll make here is what I alluded to earlier in the video. If you're planning on dedicating most of your time into a BMX-style pump track, you'll be better off with the standard Trid. It might come as a surprise to some, but you actually don't spend much time in the air at a BMX or pump track, and the surfaces are smooth enough to mitigate the need for rear suspension. At the end of the day, if you're somebody who loves spending time in the air, then this bike's combination of maneuverability and impact control will make it a blast to ride. Now, I'd love to answer any questions you have about the Trid ZZ, as it is one of my favorite bikes. Drop me a comment below. While you're down there, like and subscribe to this video and Bikes Online, where I'll be hanging out. After you've done that, get out there and get ripping.